I hope I'm visible and audible to everybody. So basically, welcome. Today we are here to begin with our part 2 of management, which was in terms of the special descriptive series. And herein we were discussing the important descriptive questions which are essential, right? Which might help you in terms of answering your phase 2 answers in terms of the FM paper basically. So therein we were discussing about management. Right? So before we move forward, EduTap has this guidebook which is going to help all those who are preparing. Why? Because if you want to, get an idea about the PYQs, practice more of them, solve more questions. Therefore, the guidebook will have the PYQs as well as the important topics. Right? So in terms of your practicing for the phase 2 exam and in terms of, getting the strategy for this exam, you can download the guidebook, right? It would be helpful for you. The link for the same would be in the description box below. So basically, today, what are we going to cover? We are getting to our part 2 of management, right? Herein we'll be seeing certain descriptive questions which have previously come, and you will get an idea as to how to answer these questions, how to attempt them, as well as sort of get an idea of the topics from which they have come. So therefore, in this exam, right, in this time's phase 2 exam, you will be able to answer better, plus have an idea what sort of questions and how they are framed, what way they can come. So that is what we'll be seeing today. Right, now moving forward with our first question. It came in 2024, so it's a very recent question, and this question is from ethics as requested in the previous section. Right, so in the previous session some of you had requested you want certain questions on ethics. This is for all of you, whoever is watching this live at the moment and anybody who's going to watch it later. The question goes, what are the key factors that influence ethics in business? Right, so the question is related to ethics in business, which is nothing but our part of business ethics. So this is coming from the part of business ethics. And what is business ethics basically? Our intro for this question has to be what is business ethics, because they are asking key factors which influence business ethics. So before we move on to any factor, first I have to explain what exactly is business ethics, right? Therefore, this is my introduction part. So in the intro, what am I supposed to write? What exactly are business ethics, which is the difference between right and wrong, that is ethics. Adding business to it, meaning in an organization, in the business context, what is right and wrong? What can you do and not do? So obviously, in an organization, you should not be stealing money, having frauds. So that is basically what business ethics talks about. What you can do, what you should not do in an organizational context, in the business context basically. So that will form your intro. Now, this is a 400 word answer, right? So for a 400 word answer, what should be the word limit of my intro? Basically, the word limit must be 10 to 12%. 10 to 12% of what? The total word limit of the answer. So for a 400 word answer, let's say your intro must be wrapped up within 40 words or so. Right? So that is your concise proper intro which you are supposed to keep. Moving on from the intro, we have to get to the body. In the body, what is the question specifically asking? It's asking about certain factors which influence business ethics. So what are the factors, which is what we have to write in the body? So, can anybody in the chats let me know if, they can think of certain factors which might influence business ethics? Can we brainstorm a bit? What sort of factors can be affecting ethics in the organizational context in a business? Basically, when we talk about factors, what can it be? Let's say your personal morals, your personal morals or personal beliefs. As an individual, I will have certain ethics, certain morals. That will be something which will influence the ethics which I am following in my business also. Let's say I am the manager, I am the leader, and I have a certain set of ethics. So that set of ethics is how I will guide all the other team members under me. So therefore, the personal morals of individuals will shape the business ethics in certain ways. Right, so that is what we are supposed to explain. First factor, give an explanation and top it up with an example. Then what more factors can we have? Can we have people trying? Can somebody let me know in the comments if you can come up with certain factors which can affect business ethics? Right, so one of them is personal morals. Another one could be in terms of the organization itself. That is, what sort of culture is the organization following? Your organizational culture will also create that environment of ethics around you. So the organizational culture matters. What else can there be? There can be scenarios of, such as, communication. How are we communicating the change? So that is going to also influence your ethics. What more factors can we have? What more factors can we have which might affect your business ethics? There can be scenarios of, such as, let's say, in your business there are certain rules and regulations which is being mandated by the government itself. So certain government regulations or rules might form the ethics. The government has already said this is, what you have to do anyhow, so that falls a line for you, right? That becomes an ethics for you, the minimum which you have to do. So that could be there. Or let's say the public opinion, what the public feels, what the public wants, that can also shape the ethics of a company. So basically, these are the factors roughly which we have to put. I have gotten a very, very good answer, which is reward systems. This can influence business ethics. Very good. That is, I guess, Avinash, right? So reward systems do influence ethics. How does it influence? Because let's say there is a reward system in your company that for following correct procedures, for being ethical, you will be given some bonus or incentive. So won't you want that bonus and incentive? To get that, you will always try to remain at that ethical line. You won't try to cross it. Therefore, reward systems also influence ethics. Good, Avinash. So these are your factors which can influence ethics. This is my body part. Then finally, what will be my conclusion? Basically, just synthesize and paraphrase the entire thing, whatever we have written till now, and give an optimistic solution. What sort of optimistic solution can we give here? What sort of optimistic solution can we give? How following business ethics is good, how it's going to enhance your reputation in the public image, everything considered, that is an optimistic solution which we can top it up, and therefore it is good to follow business ethics. It improves our work culture. Yes, very good, Avinash. So basically we can write all of this and give the conclusion. So let us move forward and have a look at the mind map now. Basically, when we talk about this part is going to be my introduction. Introduction, what am I writing? I give a basic definition. See, business ethics refers to what? It's what, guiding the behavior in your business. What is the requirement of business ethics? Because it builds trust, protects reputation, ensures compliance, and drives sustainability. So basically, keywords, major terms which you can write, which is going to, help you score maximized marks. Then we get to the body. Body is all about the factors. What factors? We have seen personal values and models. That is how your individual behavior, your individual models can affect the business ethics. So we write the points for therein. Organizational culture, how the organizational culture can lead to ethical behavior. The, reward system. So basically, Avinash, what you had mentioned in terms of reward system, we are putting that reward system under your organizational culture only. So if I am putting the reward, why? Because reward system is something which is a part of the organization only. It's the policies and the rule of the organization already set in. So under organizational culture, we can write it. Okay. Then we have legal and regulatory framework, which is mandated by the government. So government has set certain principles you have to follow, certain rules you cannot break. So that is also like the bare minimum ethics a company has to follow. Herein, we can mention corporate governance, and in this answer, what is happening is that we have a scope. In this answer, we have a scope to bringing topics from multiple chapters, which is ethics and corporate governance, because we are talking about specifically business ethics, right? So therefore, I can bring in certain concepts of corporate governance, such as what? Such as CSR activities under society and public opinion. Under legal and regulatory framework, we can mention that corporate governance is essential by, for accountability and oversight. So basically, I have a chance here to club in multiple chapters, and if you can do this successfully, then this is going to give a better impression, maximize your marks. It's fine even if you cannot, but if you can do this, if you can link between multiple topics, this will make your answer outstanding, right? And then we have economic factors. Obviously, in terms of profits, company's major point is the objective of any organization is to earn profits. So how are we balancing profits with the ethical business? That is also a part which we can write, and therefore this makes up your body. And finally, my conclusion is what? How all in all business ethics is being shaped, and how it will lead to better and sustainable success for an organization. And this is the mind map. So let us now move forward and have a look at the model answer. Basically, my intro. What is my intro? 10 to 12%, roughly 40 words. You can put the intro even in a more concise manner. So this is the model intro. your intro can be even more concise, even more shorter, as long as the keywords are mentioned. So what am I writing? What is business ethics? Principles and standards which govern the business environment, the organization. What are we doing in business ethics? Basically, we are trying to build trust, maintain reputation, ensure sustainability. The importance of this and what factors are ranging. This is my linkage point. Certain factors from personal values to organizational culture shape business ethics. This is the point of linkage between the intro and the body. And therein, from here, we start with the body. What am I writing in the body? Firstly, personal values and morals. Give a small definition or an explanation of what the personal values and morals are, and then how they are shaping business ethics. So, we will get to know what that if you have. If you are sort of a person who is honest, who is transparent, who is accountable, therefore, all of these personal values you have will also show up in the business ethics. And thus, in the business, there won't be unethical practices. There will be a reduction of unethical practices. But let's say you are a person who does not have any integrity. You are a person who is, lying even in your normal day-to-day life. So in the business also, obviously, you will lie. So this is a distinction we can give. That is your first point. And if we can mention certain other key points, good. If we can write it in a point manner, that's great. Otherwise, just mention the definition of the same and explain what exactly it means, the point. Then we move on to organizational culture. Again, what exactly is organizational culture, how it is going to make a difference, followed by certain key points that, the reward system, what is the code of conduct in the organization, or if do we have an ethical leader. Ethical leader was somebody who was following the business ethics very, very properly, right? So do we have somebody like this? In case of an ethical leader, we can come up with examples. If we have any examples of an ethical leader, we know, right? So we can put examples of Kailash Satyarthi or maybe other people also who are ethical leaders, right? So that is for you, organizational culture. Then what we can go for is the third point, which is legal and regulatory framework. That is, there are certain frameworks which the government mandates. Mention that. What framework? Your compliance requirements, your CSR, or let's say your corporate governance. If we can mention corporate governance here and explain what is corporate governance, then that is going to be very, very good. Consequences of non-compliance. If you don't comply, there will be penalties and other punishments which the government will impose on you. So to avoid that, obviously, you will remain ethical. Explain that. Then we move on to societal expectations or public opinion herein, how the public is holding you accountable. How for a business to run, you must have a good reputation and a good public image. Therefore, we can explain CSR, right? So we can explain CSR here basically, which is corporate social responsibility. Then move followed by, how we manage the reputation, or let's say we are going for these public campaigns, right? Positive image. And finally, how stakeholders often want the companies to have good ethics. Otherwise, the stakeholders will say that we are not interested in buying goods from your company, right? So therefore, we write this. Followed by economic factors, right? Explain the profit versus ethics dilemma, which is, how are we supposed to get the balance between profitability as well as ethics? And how ethical practices might incur costs, but whereas we want to have a proper sustainable focus wherein both things are mentioned. And finally, we get to the conclusion. In the conclusion, what am I writing? We synthesize. These are the things which helps business ethics, influences business ethics, how it is essential and required, and why as a company you must be prioritizing ethical business. Right? How it is going to lead to success for you. That is what we give in an optimistic conclusion, and that way we can complete this answer. So this is the way to attempt an answer this way, right? Now, if we move on to the next question is comment on the Big Five personality model. What exactly was the Big Five personality model? It was also known as the ocean model. So my definition, my intro must consist of the definition of what is the ocean model or the Big Five personality model. Explain what are the 5 traits. We had 5 traits under the ocean model. So explain what the 5 traits are and thereby tell the importance of this model, how it helps organizations in doing what, maybe selecting the correct employees, hiring them, right, properly appraising people. Give an intro. Again, how long should this be intro? 10 to 12% of the word limit, basically, let's say roughly 40 words. Then we begin the body. In the body, what am I supposed to write? I have to explain all these 5 traits. My first trait under ocean model is openness. So explain as the first point. Under openness, in the ocean model, what happens is we have 2 points, high and low. So we have to explain the characteristics of what happens if you're high in openness, what happens when you're low in openness, and thereby give an example. Right? What will be the second trait? What is the second trait of the ocean model? It is conscientiousness. What is the third trait? Third trait is extraversion, followed by agreeableness and neuroticism. So we go for all these 3 traits one by one, explain what these traits are, the total 5 traits, and then we will write a conclusion. What will be the conclusion? How exactly this Big 5 personality model is useful, right? Now, if we have a look at the mind map, what are we supposed to do? Firstly, my introduction. That is, I explain what is the ocean model, the 5 traits, and a very important essential keyword in terms of the ocean model is that these traits are on a continuum, meaning it's not fixed you have this personality trait, but they are on a continuum, either high or low. So they can range, right, from high to low. So that is what you have to mention, a keyword. That is, you are not fixed into categories, but rather you can be moving around. Then give a small keyword, small example where Big 5 model is used. And this is the same thing which we can use in our conclusion as well, which we can say by concluding ki dekho, this is why Big 5 model is required, right? So my intro is sorted. Then I get to my body. In the body, what am I doing? I'm explaining all the 5 characteristics. Yes, 5 traits. Openness, high and low. Explain the characteristics. Top it up with an example of any person you think has that trait, as long as it is relevant. Conscientiousness, again the high and low. Top it up with an example. These examples are going to help you score maximum marks in this answer, right? Because this is the differentiating factor. If you have given a good example and if you have properly linked the proper perfect example. Then we have extraversion, followed by agreeableness and neuroticism. So for each, what am I doing is high and low. What is the characteristic of each end and an example. So let us have a look at the model answers then. So this part falls my intro. Intro, as per the word limit, my basic term was being concise herein. What am I doing? I'm mentioning the keywords in the intro, which is very, very essential. What keywords? Ocean is a keyword. The 5 traits, you have to write them properly, correctly, exactly. And what am I saying is that, this model is used where? For OB. Why OB? Because under organizational behavior, one of the disciplines is psychology. And in your psychology, I am trying to understand the personality of the individual. And what is the ocean model helping me do? Understand the personality traits an individual has. So therefore, all in all, why am I doing this ocean model? Why am I understanding this? To help me, help in my analysis of OB. Therefore, if we mention OB, then that is a good keyword here. And career counseling, or let's say workplace behavior. Intro sorted. Then we begin our body from here on. In the body, what am I writing? What is openness? So I explained that openness means you are willing to embrace ideas. Therefore, people in high openness are imaginative, creative, curious. So the high in openness, low in openness, prefer traditional methods. And then we give an example that Elon Musk is one of those people we can say is high in openness. Then we move on to conscientiousness. Explain what is conscientiousness. Ki dekho, this is a degree to which person is organized, disciplined. High in conscientiousness mein, what are the characteristics? Low in conscientiousness mein, what is the characteristic? And an example of a person, let's say Warren Buffett, who is a conscientiousness person. Then what we have is extraversion. That is, if you are an extrovert or not. So we explain extraversion means you're sociable, energetic, you talk to a lot of people, have a lot of friends. People in high extraversion can fit which roles? Customer, client-facing roles, leadership positions. But if you are low in extraversion, meaning you are an introvert. Introvert here is another key term. So if you are an introvert, what will happen? You are better in terms of independent work rather than, team-based sort of a thing. So we mentioned this. Top it up with an example of a person you feel is an extrovert. And then we have agreeableness. Agreeableness is what? That you are empathetic, cooperative, everything. Like, the good characteristics. You care for people. So if you're high in agreeableness, so there will be a positive work environment. right? You will be helping others, teamwork, collaboration. But if you're low in agreeableness, then you might be stubborn, and therefore there might be more fights, more conflicts, because you're not ready to help others. Finally, to give an example, who has been a very agreeable person. And our last trait was neuroticism, which is emotional stability. Now, herein it is very important to mention that this is a negative trait. Why? Because what was neuroticism? That you are experiencing negative traits, negative emotions such as anxiety, mood swings, etc. So, in case of neuroticism, you have to mention negative trait. That is a keyword here. If you're high in neuroticism, it is bad. You will have to write that. If you're low in neuroticism, meaning high emotional stability, this is good. So you must be low in neuroticism. This must be very clearly mentioned. And finally, give an example. Ending with a conclusion. What sort of conclusion am I supposed to give? That, Big Five model is used to understand employee behavior, improve recruitment, develop leaders, etc. This model helps managers identify strengths and challenges, and therefore the optimistic solution is what? It will help us match individuals to job roles and predict the workplace sort of a scenario, improve our performance. This is what the Big Five model is used for, and therefore this is how we are supposed to attempt this answer, right? And to answer your question, sip, bite, repeat, the DEPR results, I am not yet sure about them, right? I'll get back to you once I get to know the same, right? So I'll get back to you with the answer later on. And getting to the final question, which is, why do employees resist organizational change? What is the systematic approach for bringing change? So this question is from Change. Question is asking, why do employees resist the change? So my question is divided into two parts here. You have to answer both these parts, only then you will be close to getting full marks, otherwise won't happen. So my intro. What will be my intro? Firstly, I have to mention when I talk about change, why are people resisting change? So I have to mention resisting of change. Why do people resist? Plus I have to write about planned change. Why planned change? Because they have asked for a systematic approach. A systematic approach was nothing but planned change. And herein in the intro, if I have any name of the theorist, if somebody has contributed to change, I can mention their name. So let's say in case of planned change, I might use some model. In that case, I can write the name of the theorists who has given the model, right? So my intro will be basically this. What will be the word limit for the intro? Can somebody tell me what will be the word limit for the intro in the charts? We are supposed to write a concise intro. The word limit must be 60 words and should not exceed 60. Why? Because 600 words, so 10 to 12% of 600 gives you 60 words, right? Then we get to the body. In the body, I have two parts to write. First part is factors of resisting change. Why do employees resist change? Can we brainstorm? Can we get some, answers? Can I get some answers from you? Why do employees resist change? What can be the factors? Let's say, economic reasons. Let's say economic reasons. That is, if the change comes, then you will lose your job. Will you want the change? No, you will resist the change. So economic reasons. What more factors can be there? What more factors can be there because of which you might resist change? It could be, let's say, fear of the unknown. You are not sure what will happen if this change comes. There is a fear, uncertainty regarding the future. So in that case also you will resist the change. Less motivation, as said by Yashi. So basically less motivation, we can say, is a fact. It's not exactly why people resist change, but less motivation has to be framed in a different manner. We can say that there is no proper trust or there is no proper communication. If the management has not properly said what to expect, if you can't trust the management, then in that case, obviously you are not motivated to, go for the change, right? And transfers. So transfers, what you are saying, Yashi, will technically fall under, let's say, the fear of the unknown only. Okay, you're not sure what will the future hold. You might get transferred or something else might happen. So all of that is under fear of the unknown. You're not yet sure what might come out of it. What more factors can we have in terms of resistance? Let's say there is group pressure or peer pressure. Your entire team is saying we don't want this change. So you also have to say, and yes, ki, haan, fine, I also don't want this change. right? Co-worker behavior can fall under group pressure itself, right, Avinash? So it will fall under group pressure itself. Whatever your co-workers are doing, or colleagues are saying, you will follow them basically. So that can happen. Apart from this, there might be other factors. What other factors? Let's say you are habituated. There is a habit. Things have been going this way for the last 5-10 years, so you have a habit. Obviously you are obviously adjusted with the traditional methods. Now somebody wants to completely change it, so you might not be ready to get out of your comfort zone, so therefore it might be hard to predict the habit. These are the reasons why generally you resist change. Now how are we supposed to bring about change? This is my first part of the body, mind you. My second part of the body is systematic or planned change. I have to write both these things, only then I'll be getting the marks, right? So under systematic approach, we have to write the proper systematic approach. Now herein you can either write the process of plan change. That is possible. That is, what was the process? We first determine what is the requirement for change, the need for change, followed by how are we supposed to plan the change, select a change agent, let's say, or how are we supposed to, which model or method are we supposed to use? Am I supposed to use Levine's change model or some other model, right? So either I can write that way of the plan change, or we can also write a normal general outlined plan as to how to bring change in any organization. So both these approaches are fine, whichever you are more comfortable with, and you can write better in the exam, right? But if we can mention the proper system of plan change, the process of plan change with the names of the theories and the theorists, then that is just going to give a better impression, help you maximize your marks. And then finally I will write the conclusion, wherein a synthesis and paraphrase is required for the entire answer. Optimistic solution will be what? Ki dekho, change is necessary for every organization. If there is no change, you are stagnant, and therefore that is not good for the organization. Change has to happen. Our point is to ensure that this resistance can be managed, and thereby bring change in a systematic manner to ensure the long-term success of the organization. If we can write and frame something this way, that will be my optimistic solution, right? So if we have a look at the mind map now, this part is my intro. Basically, what am I writing? Ki dekho, what is change? I am changing the structure, technology, people, right? The basic 4 key terms we had in terms of change, that is exactly what I have written here. And what I have to also mention is why resistance comes. That is, it is natural, people will resist, but with the right approach, or herein we can write with the systematic approach itself. With the systematic approach, we can go for a successful change. What will happen because of this? Company will survive, there will be growth, etc, etc. That is my intro. Then in the body, I have 2 parts. In the body, I have 2 parts. First part is resistance to change. We have discussed this, fear of the unknown. Loss of status or power herein basically means that the management might only not want the change to come because they fear that if they bring this change, the management will lose their authority, they will lose their power. So that is also possible. Then habit or comfort, can't get out of your comfort zone. Economic security might be a threat. Lack of trust with the management, lack of poor communication, then threat to your current skills, and there might be group pressure. So basically this is why your change might be resisted, and thereby we can give examples of the same if you know certain examples, right? And to answer your question, Yashi, mentioning quotes, does it add any value or some verified research? All right, so if you're mentioning a quote, then you have to be very careful while you mention it. It must be the exact correct quote, right? The quote, you cannot change the meaning of the quote. So only and only if you remember the proper quote in the correct manner, then you can write it. And yes, it will add some value. If you have written, let's say, I am using Levine's change model. In this answer, let's say I am using Levine's change model to show how systematic change can come. So herein I have quoted Levine and said, said whatever he has mentioned as per the change model. So this will add value to this answer, obviously. That will maximize your marks, differentiate your answer. But what you have to ensure is that if you're properly quoting whatever has Levine said, then the meaning inside the quotes cannot change. But let's say you're just generally defining ki dekho, Levine has said this, then that's fine. But if you're using proper quotations, then please do not change the meaning inside, the quotes. And if you add some verified research, again, you must ensure you have the proper fact, the proper data, only then write the verified research. And yes, again, it will, add marks, maximize marks, but keep the things in mind that whatever verified data you're putting must be complete. When was this conducted, by whom was this conducted, let's say, if there is a name, and how it helped, what was the data talking about. You must have all that information, while also keeping in mind the word limit, because what you are doing, the quotes and the research, that is to add on to your answer. But while writing that, ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए that you miss out on the actual question only. Question has to be answered. So if you can integrate the quotes and the data along with your question, then yes, obviously you can write it as long as you know it correctly. Yes, did that help you, Yashi? So basically, that is how you can maximize your marks. In this question, if I can quote Levine or say ki dekho, this is what Levine's change model is talking about, give good examples with the change model, then obviously this will make my answer stand out from all the other people who are writing, right? So obviously, the more you can do that, the better for you. But please make sure it is relevant and it is correct. Galat nahi likh ke aana hai hame, right? Only when you know it is correct, then you can go for it. Now, first part done, why employees resist change. The second part is systematic approach to change. I have to mention this as well. So herein I give a systematic approach, ki step-by-step process. Identify the need, develop the plan, communicate, bring the change, train people, support and facilitation, commit of leadership, implement it phase by phase. Ek baar mein to you can't bring the change. There needs to be phase by phase implementation. Think basic, think logical. That is enough to get your answer straight, right? Feedback and monitoring, and finally reinforcement. Now, either I can write it this way, or herein I have another option I'm giving all of you. This is something you can practice on your own. Go home, try to write it in terms of the process of plan change. There is a very specific 8-9 step process of plan change. So if you can write it in that way, including the Levine's change model, that is also going to work for this answer. So there can be various approaches to writing an answer. Marks isme bhi milenge. Marks you will get even if you write Levine's change model. How you are framing it, giving examples is going to determine the final thing, right? And my conclusion finally. Conclusion mein what is happening is, I give a paraphrasing. Ki resistance is normal. It is about to happen. It will happen either way. People cannot just be like ki haan everything is fine, bring change. Some people will always resist the change, be scared of it. What we have to do to ensure we can manage this resistance is by better communication, better participation, phased implementation. And finally, what will this lead to? The systematic approach. People will understand, communication will be proper, and because of this implementation, there will be a successful change and therefore long-term success of the company. This is how we are supposed to get to this answer. So if we have a look at the model answer now, this is my intro. Intro was supposed to be roughly 60 words, concise. What am I writing in the intro? What is organizational change? Why there is resistance coming in terms of organizational change? And why in terms of successful management, I must take a systematic approach to bring change and manage this resistance. I have answered all three things in the intro. See, in a short, concise keywords only, but I have answered all the three things. What is change? First part of the question, resistance of change, and systematic approach. I have clubbed all three, answered all three in the intro itself, given an idea to the examiner ki dekho, this is what I will talk about. Done. Then we begin with our body. Body mein first part is resistance to change. Under resistance, give all the points. Fear of the unknown. And if you get some example, introduction of AI can create a fear of job loss. Loss of status of power, give an example. Habit and comfort, give an example. Economic security, give an example. So basically, under all resistance factors, under all points, top it up with an example. Example should be specific. Don't give vague general examples which everybody can know. Jitna ho sake, make it specific. And in this case, in terms of the examples, if you have any verified data, what you are asking, Yashi, that about verified research. Let's say you have a verified data ki because of AI automation, this much job loss is happening, this much percentage of job loss has happened in the nation. So if you have such verifiable data, use it as an example itself, right? In the example, mention this data, and this is a very specific example for you. So if you have such data, or such cases which are happening currently, then therefore you can mention these as examples too, in a short concise manner. ज़्यादा depth में जाने की ज़रूरत नहीं है, but you can always mention them as examples. Then lack of trust in management, followed by poor communication, threat to skills, and group pressure. So basically, this is my first part of the body. Second part of the body is systematic approach. Systematic में approach में हमें क्या लिखना है? Give the process. So either we can give this sort of a process, bring the change, develop the vision, plan everything. And under each, I have to give the small explanation or, understanding what exactly is happening at this stage. If possible, an example for the entirety of this. ये हम कैसे करेंगे? Now this is just a suggestion. If you can implement, very good. Whenever you're writing a process, the example has to stay common for all the points, because मैं एक process में I'm explaining the entire thing, right? So I pick one scenario and explain that scenario through the multiple steps of the process. At each step, what is happening with this example. So if we can do something like that, then that is very good. Just a suggestion. Otherwise, you can just give the normal explanations and the definitions, or herein you can also mention Levine's change model, another suggestion for you. अगर आप ये model incorporate कर सकते हो, then please do it. It's going to be good for you, right? So we give the systematic approach, and then finally we get our conclusion. Under the conclusion, what am I writing? कि resistance to change happens. Why? Because of certain factors. A systematic approach will help us solving this and will lead to successful implementation of change, which is essential for long-term success. This is my optimistic solution. Sorted. This is how you're supposed to write and approach this answer. So I hope you guys were able to understand, the answer writing approach. If, you could reach out in the comments and let me know if this was helpful. If you have any doubts or queries, you can ask right now. Yes, because we have covered the 3 questions we'll be seeing today. So let me know in the doubts if there are any queries or doubts. Were you able to understand? Yes, everyone? All right. So if there are no queries or doubts related to the same, that would be all for the part 2 of management descriptive special series, right? So we have covered 6 questions in total. The final part of management will be coming out on 17th of July. So see you then, and all the very best for your phase 2 exams. So that would be all from my end. This was Deepika signing off.